Good afternoon, people. So, welcome to our first class since this whole coronavirus situation first hit. So, continuing along with the theme of the semester, it's been a year of first in terms of my first time teaching. This will also be my first time doing an online class. So, I ask, please, please, please continue to be kind and patient with me. So, let's just move along and set this up. Okay, hopefully, I got this figured out. Okay, so as you see on your screen, today what we'll be doing is we'll be covering drugs and consciousness. So the way that I'm going to do this is that I'm going to split the chapter up into two parts. The first part that you'll be watching now will be covering Tuesday's class, and then the second part, as you probably figured out, we'll cover for Thursday's class. So this is a breakdown and an overview of everything that's going to be covered, um, in the chapter as a whole. For today, what we're most likely going to cover is parts 1 and 2. So for part 1, dependence and addiction, and under that, looking at misconceptions about addiction as well. And then we're also going to look at psychoactive drugs as a whole. We're going to look at specifically depressants, and depending on the time, we will potentially start stimulants, although we probably won't have the time to finish it. I think I want to make sure that this class, this online class and lecture doesn't drag on too long, and so you guys still stay engaged and stimulated. So I think stimulants would probably be a good halfway mark. You're going to notice as well at the bottom of the slide that there is a link for a YouTube video. So the videos throughout all the chapters that I present to you guys, they are important. I will say that first and foremost. However, they're not necessary or required that you look at them. I put them there to help further support and supplant the information that I'm sharing with you. So I think the YouTube video that you have at the bottom of your slides is a good introduction, brief introduction to some of the things that we're going to cover today. So that way, by getting that introduction, when you hear it again explained by me when we go through the slides, you've already seen it. It's not something new, and for all of those reasons, it should be a better way for you guys to grasp and retain the information. So let's move forward. Psychoactive drugs. So we're going to look at the altering consciousness part of this chapter right now. And within that, we're going to look at drugs. So a psychoactive psychoactive drugs are chemicals introduced into the body which alter perceptions, mood, and other elements of conscious experience. So just briefly keep in mind that they didn't discriminate when they gave this description. It doesn't matter how you obtained the drug. It doesn't matter if it's prescription or not. It doesn't matter how you're ingesting the drug. It's just as long as it meets the criteria of it having an effect on your perceptions, mood, and other elements of conscious experience when you ingest it. So, addiction. Many psychoactive drugs can be harmful to the body, as I would imagine some of you would have assumed or known already. Psychoactive drugs are particularly dangerous when a person develops an addiction or misuses the substance. Um, and some of the factors related to addiction are tolerance, withdrawal, and impact on daily life of substance use. So we're going to briefly, in the next few slides, we're going to see what what tolerance is by definition and how that works. We're also going to look at it, what is a definition of addiction? So what are the criteria that someone has to meet in order to be considered to be addicted or an addict to something? And then we'll also look at as well about withdrawal. So let's continue moving along. So as promised, here you have the criteria or definition criteria that fall under addiction. So there are 11 criteria or points that fall under addiction, and they are categorized into 4 sections. So diminished control, diminished social functioning, hazardous use, and drug action. If we take a look at diminished control, so here you have uses more substance or for longer than intended. And some of the reasons behind that could simply be that what the person took, the high or the effect was a lot different or more enjoyable than they expected. unsuccessfully to regulate use of substance. So this could be things like people trying to only use on weekends, or only use when they're around friends, or giving a substance, or having a friend or somebody else hold the substance so they can't access it until a certain point. We've also kind of heard it, probably seen this, but it doesn't usually work. Spends much time acquiring, using, or recovering from the effects of substance, which I think speaks for itself, and craving, that strong urge or crave for the substance. Jonesing, fiending, as some people might say. When we look at diminished social functioning, there's use disrupts commitments at work, school, or home. So whether you might have seen examples of this in TV, movies, music, real life, through experiences of people that you know, where you notice that um, their ability to show up, or their commitment to work, school, at home functions, dynamics with people at school, at work, or at home start to change. Um, they continue to use the substance despite social problems that, again, could be caused by the disruption of commitments to social, work, or school, or home, and then causes reduced social, recreational, and work activities. That could be everything from that person's functioning prevents them from engaging more in social, recreational, or work activities, or it could be that um, given what they're going through, the potential detriments or consequences of showing up to those activities while under the influence. For hazardous use, we see continues use despite hazards, explains itself, and continues use despite worsening physical or psychological problems. Finally, under drug action, experiences tolerance. So, needing more substance for the desired effect, and experiences withdrawal when attempting to end use. So, we're going to get these last 2 points. We're going to go, the next slide, we're going to go into tolerance and explain that a bit. And with withdrawal, what's important to understand is that a lot of people who are addicts, what's happening is that they've gone beyond the phase of their addiction where the drug that they're taking is still giving them the high that is often advertised, or that people often seek. Actually, what they're doing is they're not chasing the high. What they're doing now is they're trying to stay ahead of the withdrawal symptoms. The withdrawal symptoms can be extremely intense and powerful, can be really difficult for someone to endure, and sometimes can lead to death. And so at the final stages towards addiction, you'll notice that people now are just taking the drug to avoid experiencing with the withdrawal symptoms. You'll notice at the bottom of these slides as well that there's a link to another YouTube video that speaks a little bit about what causes addiction for some people. What's important to keep in mind with this slide is that, so of the 11 criteria, anybody, in order for someone, when someone has an addiction, they'll be classified in either a mild, moderate, or severe level. For the mild, they need 2 to 3 of these 11 points. They need to meet those criteria. For the moderate, it's 4 to 5. And for the severe, it's 6 and above. So what I would like for all of you to know is, I would like you to know all of the 11 criteria for addiction. I like to know how they're broken down under diminished control, diminished social functioning, hazardous use, and drug action. And I'd like you to know how many of the 11 are required for mild, moderate, and or severe substance use levels. Let's move along. So here you see both a definition and a graph that explains what tolerance is. So tolerance, by definition, is the diminished psychoactive effects after repeated use. So the high is no longer as strong or as present. Tolerance feeds addiction because users take increasing amounts of a drug to get the desired effect. So chasing the high, so to speak. You'll notice if you look over at the graph, so there's two trajectories or lines that are being shown. The first one in the lighter pink shows response to first exposure. And the second one is response of somebody after repeated exposure to the drug. The biggest difference to notice is that with the response to the first exposure, there's an extremely small amount or dose of the drug that's taken, yet you experience some of the higher effects. over time and repeated use, you'll notice that with the second line, the drug dose that's being taken is significantly larger, but how high it reaches on the scale of the effect of the drug or the high continually goes down. And this continues and continues, where people are trying to chase the high, recreate the experience that they had, not really with the amount of the drug they were taking, but how strong the effect was of it. Okay. Withdrawal. So after the benefits of substance after the benefits of a substance wears off, especially after tolerance has developed, drug users may experience withdrawal. Withdrawal being painful symptoms of the body readjusting to the absence of the drug. For some people, they call this the down. Um, whether it's a down, withdrawal, same thing. Withdrawal worsens addiction because users want to resume taking the drug to end withdrawal symptoms. So that was what I explained before, in that it no longer becomes chasing the high with the tolerance. Once it moves to withdrawal, you're simply trying to avoid feeling that pain and that discomfort that's caused by withdrawal symptoms. Dependence. Absence of a drug may lead to a feeling of physical pain, intense cravings, physical dependence, and negative emotions, psychological dependence. So what's important for you guys to keep in mind here is I want you to be able to explain what withdrawal is. And through that explanation, be able to separate. You have to know what both withdrawal and tolerance are. So that way you're able to differentiate between the two. I want you to be able to explain how and or why withdrawal worsens addiction, because people are trying to avoid the withdrawal symptoms. And then I want you to be able to define what dependence is. So when explaining dependence, you have to be aware of and understand that it involves both physical dependence, the feelings of physical pain and intense cravings, and then the psychological dependence, which is the negative emotions. Okay. So just to add to that, the time it takes to become physically dependent varies with each individual. So I think you may have seen this or heard of this before in movies, that like, look, not everybody's the same. Not everybody is going to react the same to certain drugs. Not everybody's high is going to be the same. And not everybody's going to build up a tolerance in the same way or at the same rate as other people. So that's important to mind. And the reason why that's important is that we often look to other people who have had experience with something for information, for knowledge, for insight. But what's important here is that there's a danger, there's a risk, well, with taking the drugs overall, but also with trying to get information about what to expect, what the high is like, what you'd be going through the whole process or timeline from different people, because though their experience might not be anything like your own. When a person stops taking the drugs, the body needs time to recover. And withdrawal symptoms result because of that. Some of the withdrawal symptoms that you can experience could be agitation, anxiety, muscle aches, insomnia, runny nose, sweating, abdominal cramping, diarrhea, goosebumps, and nausea, and vomiting. Okay. So, some misconceptions about addiction. First, addictive drugs quickly corrupt. So this is misleading because research shows that only for about 10% of the population who will take an addiction or a drug, that this is true. Next, beliefs that addiction cannot be overcome voluntarily. That when someone is an addict, they do not have the power to choose to get over their addiction. That's bigger than them. The reality is that recovery rates for treated and untreated addicts differ less than you might suppose. So that's the difference between people who decide, I'm going to treat myself, I'm going to put in my own plan and my own measures to reduce and then stop my using of a substance, versus I'm going to go to help, I'm going to go to a treatment plan, I'm going to go to rehab or rehab center to get help. Um, and then finally, the belief that addiction can be extended to other repetitive pleasure-seeking behaviors. And this is debatable. So there has been shown some support, but not enough to make the conclusion that yes, that for those people who develop an addiction, that there's a risk that it's going to extend to other repetitive pleasure-seeking behaviors. The odds of getting hooked after using various drugs. So if you look there, tobacco, 32% chance. Heroin, often depicted as one of the more dangerous um, extreme drugs, 23%. Alcohol, 15%. And marijuana, 9%. So what might be interesting to note here is that look at this level. Like, take notice of the fact that tobacco, which is 32%, one of the higher addiction rates, higher, more addictive than heroin, and yet tobacco has been readily available and legal if you're 18 and above for decades, centuries, maybe even. Yet look at something like marijuana, which recently has become legalized, and we continue to hear about the medicinal benefits of marijuana, and yet look at all the restrictions that and laws that were put around the use of that. So it kind of gets you to kind of wonder and to think, why? And I'm just going to leave that for you guys. I'm not going to get lost in that. It's a separate debate. Okay, so moving along, psychoactive drugs. Psychoactive drugs are divided into three groups. There are depressants, there are stimulants, and there are hallucinogens. So for those of you who are trying to make the associations or the links between these three categories and then the three pictures on your page, depressants would go with the picture of drinks and alcohol. Stimulants would go with the picture of caffeine or coffee. And hallucinogens would go with the marijuana plant, in case some of you didn't identify that as a marijuana plant or marijuana leaves. That's what it is. Okay. You'll also notice at the bottom of this slide as well, there are links to two different videos, so two different TED Talks, one about how drugs affects the brain, and then one about how does your body process medicine. Again, I definitely think it's worth a watch, both videos. And given the fact that we all have a lot more time on our hands, why not? Okay, so let's continue along. So, depressants. We're going to look at the first type. So examples are, as was mentioned in the picture, alcohol, barbiturates, and opiates. So by definition, depressants are chemicals that reduce neural activity and other body functions. Yes, please be aware and please know what the definition of depressants are. Chemicals that reduce neural activity and other body functions. Okay. So, and then there's an added note at the bottom of this that would also could be included in depressants are inhalants. So inhalants can be, so exactly what it sounds like, people who will inhale large amounts of either glue, kerosene, or butane. So there are, like, you often see this in demographics within society that, like, so lower, like parts of society where there's lower socioeconomic status, lower access to resources, more impoverished areas where you do see people, whether it's glue, kerosene, butane, sometimes paint, and they do sniff those and they will give you a high, but they're also extremely, extremely dangerous. Okay. So effects of alcohol use, the impact of functioning. So Three major impacts or effects: slow neural processing, so reduced sympathetic nervous system activity, and slower thought and physical reaction. The next point being reduced memory formation caused by disrupted REM sleep and reduced synapse formation. And we covered REM sleep in our last chapter in terms of the importance and the benefits of it. And impaired self-control. So, sorry, hiccups. Impaired judgment, impaired self-monitoring, and impaired inhibition, increased accidents and aggression. So if you just go through these briefly, for slow neural processing, I want you to take notice of the second part of that definition: slower thought and physical reaction. This, I mean, this is in large part, I'm going to associate this with drinking and driving. One of the reasons why it is so dangerous is because, as you see here, it slows down your thought process and your physical reaction. Like, for any of you who drive, or have been on the road in the car with somebody else who's driving, you know how fast things can change, how important it is to constantly be checking, how important it is to be able to react quickly to a situation, because things change in an instant or on a dime, and your ability to react can be the difference between life or death. So this kind of highlights and brings to home why there's so much emphasis put on avoiding or refraining from both drinking and driving. Reduce memory formation, so cause disrupted REM sleep. Remember that we saw from last chapter that a full sleep cycle, non-REM 1, 2, 3, and then REM sleep being the fourth stage, lasts about 90 minutes. And so if that sleep cycle, so it says here that that sleep cycle is being disrupted because REM sleep you're not allowed to engage in your full REM sleep, and the effects of that it's going to have on your memory. And then finally, for impaired self-control, this comes to a lot in terms of the behaviors that you might notice when some people have been drinking or are drunk. So I think we've all seen in movies, again, popular media, in our own lives, people made really bad decisions or try to make really bad decisions or judgments when drunk. And then for increased accidents, I think that also relates to impaired or slow down reaction time and bad decision. We've all seen people get tempers and get really angry or get into fights, bar fights, if you will, when drunk. And then the last thing, inhibition. So that notion of all these people, when the next day when they wake up after a heavy night of drinking, be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that. All the regrets, so to speak. So for that touches to the inhibition, and that inhibition is your ability to kind of manage and hold and refrain from engaging in certain behaviors. You can link it to, I guess, your conscious or like your moral compass, in that the things that you inhibit, the certain urges that you might inhibit, are things that normally you shouldn't be doing or not accepted by society. Yeah, and I'll just leave it there for you guys to kind of fill in the blanks of what that looks like. So again, at the bottom of this slide, there are several links for you guys to explore in terms of looking at the effects of drugs and alcohol. You'll also see that two pictures, so chronic use and so brain damage. So a scan of a woman without alcoholism and a scan of a woman with it, and the difference, you can see the difference in the images there, and then the videos that you see can further explain what you're looking at and the differences between those two pictures. So there's a YouTube video about the truth about alcohol. It's off the BBC documentary. And there's one about alcohol and drug abuse and the increased risk of schizophrenia, mental health issues. And that was from a CTV report. And then finally to add, okay, no, actually, we're going to move on. So barbiturates, what are they? Barbiturates are tranquilizers, drugs that depress central nervous system activity. So some examples are Nembutal, Seconal, and Amitol. Some of the effects are reducing anxiety and inducing sleep, right? If you think of reducing anxiety and inducing sleep. So if you think of it, if we think of a tranquilizer, for those of you who know of it, tranquilizers are usually what are used to either sedate or put someone or something to sleep. Oftentimes, they're used on animals. So whether it's in a zoo, whether it's in the wildlife, if there's a reason or need to put an animal to sleep or to make it more calm, whether it's because you need to administer a medication, whether it's because you need to do a procedure in terms of maybe surgery, whether it's because they're becoming violent or dangerous. Those are some of the reasons why. Um, those are some of the reasons why someone might use a tranquilizer. So some of you may not know, but in terms of tranquilizer use, um, some of the more popular tranquilizer uses that people may use, there may be tranquilizers that are used for animals like pets, or sometimes even horse tranquilizers. I know. Okay. Oops, let me just go back. So, examples, Nembutal, Seconal, and Amytal, the effects reducing anxiety and inducing sleep. And then problems are caused is that it could reduce memory, have effects on judgment, and it can reduce memory, have effects on judgment and concentration, and can lead to death if combined with alcohol. Okay. Hopefully none of you are aware of any of these tranquilizers because you're not using them. There are other drugs that qualify as tranquilizers. These are not the only ones, but this is a good kind of example introduction in terms of some of the more popular ones. So a little bit added points that you'll see at the bottom of your slides. Barbiturates were first used in medicine in the early 1900s and became popular in the 1960s and 70s as treatment for anxiety, insomnia, which is an inability to fall asleep, or seizure disorders. So again, like if tranquilizers help calm us or put us to sleep, then it makes sense. If you're experiencing anxiety, something that is a calming agent will help. If you're experiencing an inability to sleep, something that's going to put you to sleep is obviously going to help. And then if you're having seizures, so moving around, but the active seizures that are more commonly showed, it's the ones where people are shaking or trembling, that can calm the nervous system and the body down. So reducing the shaking and the seizure, and therefore reducing the risk or the dangers associated with having that seizure. They evolved into recreational drugs that some people use to reduce inhibitions, decrease anxiety, and to treat unwanted side effects of illicit drugs. Okay, so there are many different barbiturates. The main difference among them is how long their effects last. The effects of some of the long-lasting barbiturates can last up to 2 whole days. Just think about that. Okay, let's move along. Okay, so opiates. Opiates are highly addictive depressants, and I think a lot of you will be a lot more familiar or probably heard about opiates as we're currently being described as going through an opiate crisis right now. So opiates depress nervous system activity. Oh, and just a big note, like whether going through, whether it was opiates, barbiturates, so we're looking at the depressants right now, I definitely want you to be able to accurately define them. So for barbiturates, I would like you to tell me about their effects, their problems, and give me an example of one type. Then, sorry, I also want you to be able to tell me what are the effects, some of the effects alcohol has. Sorry, so let's move back. So opiates depress nervous system activity. This reduces anxiety and especially reduces pain. High doses of opiates produce euphoria. So euphoria is this kind of like amazing nirvana type feeling where you feel absolutely great, not just emotionally, but physically as well. Opiates work at receptor sites for the body's natural pain reducers, endorphins. And then opiates are chemicals such as morphine and heroin that are made from the opium poppy. So I think everybody probably knows what a poppy is. The iconic flower that we all wear for Remembrance Day, and Flanders Fields the poppies blow, etc., etc. Yes. So for those of you who didn't know, that poppy seeds are the main source of opium. So you'll look at the bottom of the slide and you will see a large amount of different videos that you can access about opiates. So everything from how do pain relievers work, the real history of drugs, episodes 3 and 6, and how does anesthesia work. I highly suggest that you watch at least the first one. So how do pain relievers work, the TED Talk. The other ones can be more for your interest and curiosity, which I do encourage, but that's really up to you. So to add as well, some people even withdraw from opiates after being given such drugs for pain while in the hospital without realizing what is happening to them. They think that they have the flu, and because they don't know what that opiates would fix the problem, they don't crave the drugs. Okay, let's move along. Oh, and just for this picture here at the bottom, so this is a picture describes what opiates could look like, often in terms of coming in a pill form. Oftentimes opiates are things that are prescribed medications, and then the different ways that you can inject them. So you'll see there that there's a spoon. For the spoon, oftentimes what is done is the opiate is crushed up, and then a lighter is put underneath the spoon to heat it up so it becomes a liquid. You would then take the syringe, put it into the liquid, pull the top half part of the syringe to take up the substance, and then you would administer it in your vein intravenously or somewhere in your body. It doesn't have to be the vein, but the reason why this is done. So some of you may have seen this, whether it's people taking heroin or other drugs. Some of you may have seen this in different movies or shows. The reason why they do it is because the way that you ingest a drug is going to affect, to a certain degree, the effects of it or how quickly you're going to experience it. By them crushing it up, putting it into a liquid, what they're doing is they're breaking down the substance. So when you would take a pill and you would ingest it naturally on your own, your stomach and your body would just, like, your stomach would break it down with stomach acids. It would pass through your body and it eventually would go into your bloodstream, and that's how it would take the effect. With this, it bypasses the breaking it down of your body, so it's faster rather than waiting for your body to digest it. It breaks it down and makes it into a liquid substance, and then it's put directly into your bloodstream to increase and accelerate the effects of the drug. Okay, let's move along. Oops. Okay, so stimulants. Just give me a quick moment. Okay, so for stimulants, first at the top, we'll just take a look at a definition. So stimulants are drugs which intensify neural activity and bodily functions. Yes, you must understand this definition. Some examples of stimulants are caffeine, nicotine, amphetamines and methamphetamines, cocaine, and ecstasy. So as we already know, caffeine is something that over the counter is legal. You can find in terms of caffeine pills. You can find it in terms of coffee, some forms of tea, a large amount of sodas and soft drinks have them, as well as a lot amount of energy drinks also have them. Nicotine, as you know, whether that be through shisha, whether that be through vaporizers, buying cigarettes, chewing tobacco, etc. cocaine and ecstasy, I would imagine that most of you have heard of before, knowing that they're illegal drugs. And then we'll also look into amphetamines and methamphetamines and what those are. So some physical effects of stimulants are dilated pupils, increased breathing and heart rate, increased blood sugar, and decreased appetite. Okay, so what I think I'll do is I'm going to stop here for today. If you guys have any questions about the material, please feel free to send me a message through Mio, or yeah, send me a message through Mio and I can respond to you directly. Or what I might also look to do is, in the same way that we would normally have class time where you guys can ask questions to kind of further cement your understanding, what I think I'll do is I'll set times throughout the week, or at least a time throughout the week where you guys can join me through Zoom on a video session, and that can be your opportunity to speak to me and ask me certain questions about the material. So it could also be beneficial because not only getting your questions answered, but also hearing other people's questions in the same way class works, and how that can further support your understanding and learning of the material. Thank you for your time. Stay safe and stay healthy, everybody, to you and to yours.